Part 47. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 461. Golden Summoner. Xuanhuan was completely immersed in the refining of the formation disk. Time passed quickly in the secret room. For 7 days, he didn't even pay much attention to his stomach growling. He just drank some water and threw it into his mouth. After 2 Bigo pills, I didn't care anymore. During this period, he failed twice when refining the formation base. 7 days later, the secret room was filled with heavy fog, with lightning and thunder in the fog. From time to time, sharp sword lights flashed through the fog, stirring the fog in the secret room and rolling it. As Xuanhuan played his last spell, the 8 golden swords, lightning and mist flying in the secret room disappeared instantly, and a golden array appeared in Xuanhuan's hand. Xuanhuan finally grew taller. Exhaling a breath, he glanced at the formation plate in his hand, and a smile appeared on his face. Finally made it. The formation disk in Xuanhuan's hand at this moment is somewhat similar to the previous tortoise shell 5 elements reversed Bagua sword formation, except that there are 6 golden turtles on the formation disk and 8 golden swords, which are located on the stem of the formation disk. In the 8 directions of Gan, Zhen, Zhen, Sun, Li, Kun, and Dui, there are more formation patterns of Kirigaku and Thunderfire that only the formation master can understand. Compared with the turtle shell 5 elements reversed Bagua sword formation made by Xuanhuan before, this formation is more like an evolved version of the previous formation, with more powerful functions and improved attack and defense capabilities. This also means that Xuanhuan's formation method took a step further. If it had been this formation that trapped Deacon Ling before, the battle would have been even easier. If the golden tortoise is refined with Tai black gold, the defensive power of the array will be 3 points stronger. If the materials of the 8 flying swords can correspond to the Bagua formations, use materials such as azure iron, orichalcum, and flame gold. After refining, the power of the flying sword will be stronger. If the same formation disks can be superimposed into a series of formations, linking each other, one formation disk within another, and the complete formation disk can be refined into an array weapon, so that first, a formation plate that can attack, defend, and trap, and then add war puppets that can fight, infinite superposition. Looking at the formation disk in his hand, Xuanhuan murmured to himself, with divine light flashing in his eyes. He still had many ideas in his mind about this formation disk, but due to conditions, he could only do this temporarily. The formation is mysterious and profound, and there is still a long way to go in the future. This formation can be continuously optimized in the future and become the basic formation for exploring the way of formation. Well, if the previous tortoise shell 5 elements reversed Bagua sword formation belongs to version 1.0, then the formation disk in front of me must be version 2.0. I will use this formation disk to conquer the world, and I will slowly improve it in the future. At this time, Xuanhuan found that his belly was growling again. The last time he took Bigo pill seemed to have been 2 days ago. This time he stayed in the secret room for 7 days, almost without sleep, with his brain working at a high speed and his spirit highly concentrated. As soon as the formation disk in front of him was completed, Xuanhuan felt a little tired. He put away the formation disk and walked out of the secret room directly. Go to the small courtyard outside the secret room. After moving his body a little, Xuanhuan opened the courtyard door and walked out. After changing his vest, it was like changing his life. The troubles caused by the previous vest seemed to have completely disappeared, and his whole mood became lighter. There is a restaurant in Galaxy Manor, just above the waterfall in the cave. Guests staying here can dine in the restaurant at any time. As soon as Xuanhuan left his yard, he immediately jumped into the sky. More than 10 seconds later, he landed at the door of the Galaxy Manor restaurant. The waterfall flew down from the side of the restaurant. The environment for dining here is indeed good. The restaurant overlooks most of the courtyard in the cave. The restaurant was filled with summoned maids, and Xiaopinggan entered the restaurant. Half of the restaurant here is a transparent food storage warehouse, with a variety of food in it. Whatever you want to eat, you can order what you like in the food warehouse and choose the ingredients yourself, and the restaurant's chef will help you make it fresh. Everything is done under your nose, and the food will be tested for poison after it is prepared, which eliminates the possibility of food being poisoned. Xiaopinggan randomly ordered some ingredients, and the two chefs in the restaurant started to handle the food neatly on the kitchen table in front of Xiaopinggan. If I could summon the chef, it would be convenient in the future, but I don't know what the boundary beat is that summons the chef. Thinking of chefs, the names of several famous chefs in history immediately popped into Xiaopinggan's mind, including Yi Yin, Yi Ya, He Gong, Shanzu, Fans Hung, Lady Lu. An hour later, Xiaopinggan's selected ingredients were finally made into dishes that were full of flavor, and were served. Mapo tofu, dongpo pork, a boiled cabbage and a platter, and a bowl of crystal clear, plump, and fragrant rice. These simple meals made Xiaopinggan feel his taste buds. He came back to life again. Although the Bigo pill can prevent people from being hungry, eating that kind of food makes people completely lose the fun of enjoying food. Of course, these dishes here are called by different names, but the methods are exactly the same. Only halfway through the meal, Xiaopinggan felt that his health bar was full again, and then he saw a familiar face appearing in Galaxy Manor. Liang Tian, who was dressed in red robes, was leading two white-robed disciples, accompanied by a maid from Galaxy Manor, striding from the entrance of Galaxy Manor, and walked directly to the entrance of the courtyard where Mengziki lived. As soon as he saw Liang Tian, Xiaopinggan thought to himself, "It's finally here." 7 days after Long Huan disappeared in the Immortal City, as Long Huan's commanding deacon these 2 days, he finally realized something was wrong and brought someone to find him. This response was not too slow, and no one reported the case, because these days were still Long Huan's vacation and free time, which at least showed that Liang Tian was still competent at his job. The lucky boy beside him didn't even need Xiaopinggan's order, he had already flown to Liang Tian to eat melon at close range. "Is Master Long Huan entering here?" Liang Tian turned his head and asked the maid who brought him in here. "Yes," the maid nodded, "Master Long Huan seems to be here to visit his friend." "Who lives here?" "Mengziki, a summoner who came here from the Dead Sea." "Where's that Mengziki?" "I left Galaxy Manor 7 days ago and haven't come back yet." Hearing these words, Liang Tian's face suddenly became solemn. "Have these Master Tian Long Huan ever come out of this courtyard?" "No," the maid shook her head, "it's normal for summoners who live here not to come out for several months." "Open the door here, I want to go in." "Ah, I don't have this right. This requires the personal approval of Manager Lu." The maid shook her head and said, "You can tell Mr. Lu that the person who brought people here to break down the door today is Liang Tian." Liang Tian didn't say any more nonsense. He just looked coldly and waved his hand. A ball of scorching fire flew out from his hand and hit the door directly. The door of the courtyard was instantly blown to pieces and collapsed. The key to the courtyard had been left inside for a long time. The array protecting the courtyard was actually closed. Once the door was smashed, the array inside was not touched. As soon as the door fell down, Liang Tian entered the courtyard directly. After a glance, went straight to the secret room. As soon as he entered the secret room, Liang Tian saw the few lines of large characters that Xiaopinggan left here. After seeing those words, Liang Tian's expression changed instantly. Without thinking, he took out a crystal secret talisman from the space equipment and crushed it into pieces. Afterwards, Liang Tian withdrew from the secret room and stood guard outside the courtyard. In less than 10 minutes, 7 or 8 red-robed deacons, hundreds of white-robed disciples, and Manager Fu in blue robes, a large black crowd, flew directly from the entrance outside Galaxy Manor and landed in the small courtyard. In and around Only the red-robed deacon and Director Fu entered the small courtyard, while the other white-robed disciples were on guard outside. As soon as Manager Fu arrived, Liang Tian immediately went up to him, cast a silent barrier, leaned close to Manager Fu's ear, and whispered something. Director Fu's face was as dark as ink. He waved his hand and asked the other red-robed deacons to wait in the yard, and then asked Liang Tian to take him into the secret room. After entering the secret room and looking at the words on the wall, Manager Fu also changed his expression and killed the sole master disciples of the Wanshen sect, let his disciples sneak into the Wanshen sect, and also deliberately coveted the divine spring of the Wanshen sect in the immortal sea. If the words on the wall were true, old monster Hua deserved death that day. Director Fu, I think the disappearance of Deacon Ling in the past 2 days must be related to this. Liang Tian said from the side. I will report this matter directly to the Presbyterian Church. Manager Fu didn't say a word, just waved his hand and peeled off the metal wall with words in the secret room. He installed the metal wall into his space equipment and left with a sullen face. Secret room. The people in charge of the hall came and went quickly, and almost no one knew what happened. Xia Ping'an, who saw all this in the restaurant, picked up the green and white boiled cabbage with satisfaction and took a delicious bite. This boiled cabbage, eaten together with dongpo pork, is just right to relieve the tiredness. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 462. After finishing his meal, Xia Ping'an patted his belly and returned to his yard with satisfaction. When passing by Mengziqi's courtyard, he took a look and saw that Galaxy Manor moved quickly, and a large number of summoned craftsmen were already rebuilding the collapsed courtyard gate. Xia Ping'an, who returned to his yard, dropped another Lianji mysterious ice and fire sword formation in the yard to protect his yard, then returned to the bedroom and fell asleep. I don't know how long he slept, but it was about 7 or 8 hours. When Xia Ping'an woke up, his energy returned to its peak again. After returning to the secret room, he arranged the 2.0 version of the tortoise shell 5 elements reversed Bagua sword formation, and then summoned Chensing Assassin and Xuanhuan to guard the secret room. Xia Ping'an took out the boundary pearl on his body. Before completing the secret method of clone, Xia Ping'an was going to fuse the 2 world beads in his hand first. In the end, the summoner still relied on the world beads and the realm of strength to speak. The process leading to the 7 Suns realm can only be done step by step. After the last fusion of Tianheng's 500 warriors and 2 other divine power world beads, the upper limit of Xia Ping'an's secret mandala's divine power has reached 7,695 points. It is no longer known how far it is from the 8,820 points required to advance to the 7 Yang realm. Unconsciously, the distance has shrunk by a large distance. The previous Saint Master's world bead and the Forger's world bead were too powerful, but after the 2 world beads were fused, Xia Ping'an's divine power increased by 488 points. Xia Ping'an first took out the boundary bead with the words Medicine Alliance written on it. After thinking for a moment, it started to fuse with blood. Xia Ping'an didn't know what was going on with this world bead. He was a little cautious before, but after killing Deacon Ling, Xia Ping'an's mentality changed slightly and he became more proactive and bold. This kind of thing made him confused. The detailed boundary beads were more challenging than the previous ones that he knew the basics of. Xia Ping'an was not afraid at all, and even had a faint expectation. With blood dripping on it, in just a moment, Xia Ping'an was wrapped in a cocoon of light and entered the world in the world bead. As soon as he opened his eyes, Xia Ping'an stood at the door of a courtyard. The courtyard was in the mountains, surrounded by birds and flowers. Outside the courtyard, there was a large bamboo forest. Around Xia Ping'an, there were more than 10 young people standing here with him. Those young people were whispering. Look at the clothes of those young people. They were all Ming Dynasty clothes. He himself was also wearing a round collar and big sleeves. He wears a green robe and a Confucian scarf on his head, looking like a Ming Dynasty official. Mr. Lin has been living in seclusion here for these years and has never thought of accepting a disciple. This time Mr. Lin wants to accept a disciple. It is a big opportunity that I have been waiting for. I must seize it. For a master like Mr. Lin, a hidden great doctor, and proficient in the art of alchemy, as long as we can learn 1 or 2 points of Mr. Li's skills, we will have no worries about food and clothing in the future. I heard that the prefect came to visit Mr. Lin personally 2 days ago. No, back then the prefect's father was seriously ill and he asked Mr. Lin to go to the house for treatment. I heard that when Mr. Lin arrived, he took out a few pills and the prefect's father recovered. I heard that Mr. Lin has a granddaughter who is very beautiful and fragrant. Listening to the discussions around him, Xiaopingyan was a little confused. The voices of the people around him sounded a bit like the accents in eastern Zhejiang, but who was Mr. Lin? What he didn't know at all was that Mr. Lin might be an expert hermit in Chinese history who was proficient in medical skills and alchemy. The names of these hermit experts may not be found in history books. The name of this world beat is Yaolian. Could it be related to the path of medicine and alchemy? Just as Xiaopingyan was quickly sorting out the information in his head, the gate to the yard in front of him suddenly opened. An old man who looked like a butler came out with several dignified servants. People waiting outside the yard suddenly surrounded him. "Go up." The housekeeper glanced at the people outside the yard, cleared his throat, and then spoke, "Everyone, Mr. Lin only saw one of you today. Mr. Lin gave you some pairs to test your literary thinking and ability. If you match all the pairs and pass the level, you can meet Mr. Lin." The style of couplets in the Ming dynasty was so popular that Xiaopingyan didn't expect that this medicinal couplet would come to counter the couplets. No wonder. Those waiting here were all surprised. "Listen, everyone, this couplet is coming." After the butler finished speaking, there was a moment of silence in front of the door. Then the butler pointed to the bamboos in front of the door, took out a couplet, and unfolded it directly in front of everyone. I saw that the first line of the couplet contained a line of words, "Bamboo leaves are best for treating summer heat." This is a pair of couplets, and it is also a test of the people who come here to understand the properties of medicine. It is a comprehensive question for later generations of college entrance examinations in liberal arts and science, but that's all. While the others were still in a daze, Xiaopingyan had already taken a step forward and blurted out, "Little buplurum, especially for typhoid fever. The light bamboo leaves can relieve the heat, and the small buplurum can ward off the cold, and the upper and lower couplets are so neatly matched that it is impossible to find fault at all." The butler's eyes lit up and he glanced at Xiaopingyan. "That's a good match. This young master can follow me into the courtyard. If the rest of you are suitable, you can come in later." Amidst the envious eyes of others, Xiaopingyan walked to the door and entered the courtyard under the leadership of the housekeeper. As soon as they entered the courtyard gate, they were greeted by a screen wall. Turning around the screen wall, there was a corridor. The housekeeper took Xiaopingyan to the corridor. There was a landscape lotus pond in front of the corridor. The scenery was beautiful. At the same time, there was also a corridor in front of the corridor. There is another couplet hanging, "Night on the lake before the wind and moon." The housekeeper smiled and pointed to the couplet hanging on the corridor. "Master, please see how this sentence is correct. This is to use medicine to enter the scene, and similarly, it must also be treated by using medicine to enter the scene." Xiaopingyan smiled slightly and said, "It's half summer cold outside the window." The housekeeper nodded and smiled, looking at Xiaopingyan with more eager eyes. "Meow, sir, please come with me." After passing through the corridor, a young man of 12 or 13 years old appeared in front of him and blocked the way. The young man looked up at Xiaopingyan and asked the steward, "Steward Fu, this man has read the 2 couplets in front of him." "Well, yes, this young master has already shown his face," the housekeeper laughed. "He has some ability. If he wants to see Grandpa, He has to pass my test. The boy glanced at Xiaopingan, pretended to be old-fashioned, and started to ask the question. Pulsadala, holding a spurge, crossing the sea. The horse fought with the horsetail and grass bandits against the lily, and returned to the court, worthy of being a general and an old man. Xiaopingan pondered for a moment, and then he said, the red lady, with gold hairpins and silver flowers, is 5 times more powerful than peonies and peonies. When Sistant leaves the pavilion, she looks like a mica fairy. The young man was originally looking at Xiaopingan critically. As soon as Xiaopingan's couplet came out, the young man was stunned. He smacked his mouth and thought about Xiaopingan's couplet, and then he smiled. You have the ability, okay, I'll let you pass this level. After saying that, the young man got out of the way. After walking through the corridor and coming to the flower hall, there were 3 pretty and clever maids standing in front of them. Those maids looked at Xiaopingan's face. One of them, a pretty and bold maid, looked directly at Xiaopingan under the gaze of the 2 maids next to him. He opened his mouth and said, a few of us also have a couplet, please let me check it out. Girl, please tell me. The maidservant said, Jinchai's cloth skirt lasts for half a summer. Xiaopingan pondered for a moment. Gardenia light pink welcomes the winter. A maid next to her was not convinced. She took a step forward and said again, the aster welcomes the spring and the fragrance of the wood grows. Xiaopingan glanced at the faces of several maids, and smiled slightly again. The matchmaker is happy at first sight. Ah! The 3 maids' faces turned red inexplicably. They glanced at each other with smiles on their lips. After bowing to Xiaopingan, they also withdrew. At this time, the housekeeper looked at Xiaopingan with more and more joy. The 2 came to the flower hall. There was a written couplet on the table in the flower hall. An old servant stood in front and pointed at the couplet. And pointed to the pen, ink, paper and inkstone on the other side of the table. Young master, please write the second couplet. Xiaopingan looked at the written first couplet. The handwriting of the first couplet was beautiful and seemed to be written by a woman. Wu Rong's life is so you Loren dare not be meticulous. Xiaopingan thought for a while, picked up the pen on the table next to him, dipped it in ink, and wrote the second couplet in a flash. Treating others with magnanimous simplicity makes a gentleman have a long-lasting ambition. The old servant dried up the second couplet written by Xiaopingan, saluted Xiaopingan, held the second couplet in both hands, and left. The housekeeper looked at Xiaopingan with a smile, and led Xiaopingan directly through the flower hall and to the living room. An old man with silver beard and hair was sitting on the Grand Master's chair in the living room, looking at Xiaopingan with a smile, and his eyes were very satisfied. I've met Mr. Lin. Please sit down. I have a couplet here at the end. What do you think of it? Mr. Lin said, and then said the first couplet, Yazhimu, farewell to lotus seeds. I have traveled for several seasons and passed through many birthplaces. When I arrived at Chasha along the way to the garden, Skizanapeta was chopped, Tribulus was draped, and the road was covered with platycodon. Xiaopingan pondered for a moment and then read the second couplet, up to now, I have been content with my heart and fulfilled my ambition. I have experienced thousands of lilies, won the joy of thousands of families, and am among the fennel. I admired the red flowers on the way. I walked through the familiar land and all roads are open. As soon as Xiaopingan's couplet came out, Mr. Lin stroked his beard and laughed, wonderful, wonderful, great, great. After saying that, the old man said directly to a screen in the living room, Grandpa, how do you like the husband you have chosen for you? What, picking a husband? Xiaopingan was also stunned. Didn't he choose a disciple? A timid female voice came from behind the screen, it's all up to Grandpa. Xiaopingan looked towards the screen and saw a faintly graceful woman standing behind the screen, seeming to be secretly looking at the place. Haha, this world beat is quite interesting. If such a fate really existed in history, it would be a good story. In the secret room, only half an hour later, the light cocoon on Xiaoping'an's body dissipated. The divine power in the sky caisson of the secret mandala temple has increased by 49 points again, reaching 7,744 points. The alchemist in his secret mandala has also advanced and can summon a second-level alchemist. This world pearl is full of rewards. Xiaoping'an, who had just finished fusing the world bead, did not rest. He directly took out Wang Zhejian's world bead and fused it with blood. After a moment, Xiaoping'an opened his eyes. He took a look at himself. Fortunately, he was a man. He was wearing a dragon robe and sitting on the golden palace. A group of palace maids and eunuchs lined up in the palace, displaying beautiful women one after another. The portrait unfolded before him. "Your Majesty, these are the portraits of the ladies in the palace of Yeding. Please take a look at them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 463. He actually became Emperor Yuan of Han Dynasty. Xiaoping'an looked at the portraits of palace maids in various poses displayed in front of him in the main hall, and he immediately came to his senses. In fact, Zhejian's departure from the fortress in history was not as bad as the legends in later literary works. Many works describe Zhejian's departure from the fortress as a humiliating marriage ceremony of the Han Dynasty. This completely obliterated the countless famous generals and warriors of the Han Dynasty. Merit. In real history, the Han Dynasty reached its peak in the era of Emperor Han Yuan. At this time, the Xiongnu had been attacked by nearly 10 emperors before the Han Dynasty. In the first year of Jingning, Hu Hangzi, the leader of the southern Huns, very obediently came to Chang'an to pay homage to Emperor Yuan of the Han Dynasty, to fulfill the courtesy of a vassal and ask himself to be his son-in-law. Emperor Han Yuan saw that Hu Hangzi, the leader of the southern Huns, was quite sensible and well-behaved, so he agreed to Hu Hangzi's request. Of course, facing a barbarian tribe like the Xiongnu, Emperor Han Yuan was reluctant to let the blood of the Lu family and the royal nobles, princesses and princesses go. She really wants to marry a Huns, but at this time, the southern Huns also need to give her face and appropriate comfort, and she cannot slap her face. Isn't it just a woman? It's not a grievance to find a child from an ordinary family in the Han Dynasty and give it to Hu Hangzi, marry her to the southern Xiongnu, and become the queen of the southern Xiongnu tribe. This is what Emperor Yuan of Han thought. Emperor Yuan of the Han Dynasty was naturally reluctant to part with the beautiful woman, so he thought that he could just choose an ugly woman in the palace to marry Hu Hangzi and everything would be fine. However, he never thought that under such a strange mistake, Wang Zhejian would be married to him. Out. Of course Wang Zhejian is not ugly, but is extremely beautiful in the world. She is the most beautiful girl in South County of Han Dynasty. Emperor Yuan of the Han Dynasty usually chose too many women and beauties, and he was probably a little numb. In order to save trouble, Emperor Yuan of the Han Dynasty asked the palace painter to draw a portrait for each of the beauties entering the palace. When he wanted to choose a beautiful woman, he asked a group of the eunuch and the maid took out the portraits and unfolded them in front of him. At a glance, he could easily see who was beautiful and who was ugly, and who was most to his liking. Moreover, this choice is more suitable for the emperor's status. Your Majesty, the portraits of all the maids in Yeding are here. Who does your Majesty want to give to Hu Hangzi? An old eunuch beside him looked at Xiaoping'an without saying anything. He was still looking at the portraits in trance, and couldn't help but wonder. A reminder whispered from the side. The maids in Yeding were all women who had never been favored by Emperor Han Yuan, and had not even seen Emperor Yuan of Han before entering the palace. Xiaoping'an stepped down from the throne and slowly walked around in front of the portraits of palace ladies. As he walked, Xiaoping'an stopped in front of a portrait. There was a beautiful palace lady holding a banana fan. is standing on tiptoes, trying to catch butterflies among the beach flowers. The whole painting is very vivid, and the figure and posture of the palace maid are all beautiful. The name of this palace maid, Fu Yuan, is written on the portrait. Who painted this painting? Xiaopinggan asked. Your Majesty, this painting was painted by Mao Yanxiao. The old eunuch following Xiaopinggan just glanced at the painting and said. Not bad, not bad, the painting is good. Xiaopinggan nodded. Mao Yanxiao, thank you for your Majesty Chrysostom's great kindness, the old eunuch glanced to the side and said in a high voice. When one of the several painters standing in the corner of the hall heard this, he immediately beamed with joy and hurriedly came up. Thank you for the first 2 steps. Is this guy Mao Yanxiao who framed Miss Zhejian? Xiaopinggan glanced at Mao Yanxiao. Mao Yanxiao looked to be in his 50s. He looked human-like, gentle, and polite, just like the experts who specialize in fraud who appeared on TV marketing programs in later generations. Good. I'll deal with you later. Xiaopinggan secretly said in his heart, just give this Fu Yuan to Hu Hangzi. The old eunuch next to him was stunned when he heard Xiaopinggan's words. His Majesty has changed his gender. Last night, His Majesty said that he could just choose any ugly palace maid to give to Hu Hangzi. Why was it that when he chose the painting today, I also chose a beautiful one? But the old eunuch didn't dare to ask any more questions. He just asked someone to put away the painting and prepare to make arrangements. Hu Hangzi has not arrived in Chang'an yet. Only the envoys of the southern Xiongnu are in Chang'an. These matters must be decided in advance before Hu Hangzi arrives in Chang'an. The reason why Xiaopinggan chose this palace maid named Fu to give to Hu Hangzi was because in his impression, some unofficial legends recorded that Wang Zhejian offended a woman named Fu in the palace. Later, the woman was killed by Emperor Yuan of Han Dynasty. After being selected as Zheyi, his status was suddenly much higher than that of Wang Zhejian. He targeted Wang Zhejian everywhere, causing Wang Zhejian to suffer a lot. Xiaopinggan continued to pace, scanning the portraits of palace maids one after another. Finally, in the last row of those portraits, Xiaopinggan saw a familiar name Wang Qiang on a portrait. Wang Qiang is Wang Zhejian's real name. Wang Zhejian in the portrait is the ugliest one among those portraits. Wang Qiang is standing in front of a pavilion window with a slightly stiff posture, holding a pipa in his hand. His nostrils are slightly larger, and there are a few moles under his eyes. Like teardrops, one cannot see how graceful the figure is, as it is all covered by the pipa. It was this painting that fooled Wang Zhejian. Xiaopinggan sighed. After Wang Zhejian, in future generations, no beautiful woman in the world would dare to offend a photographer. Who painted this painting? Your Majesty, it was still painted by Mao Yanxiao, said the old eunuch next to him. Okay, let's withdraw the others for now. This Wang Qiang is interesting. I have never seen such a strange-looking palace maid among the palace ladies. Judging from her appearance, she can also play the pipa. I just want to listen to the pipa today, so I will recruit her to come to this palace and play a song for me. Yes. Xiaopinggan said calmly here. Mao Yanxiao, the palace painter who had just been praised and had a good look on the front, turned pale instantly and his whole body was trembling. Finally, he and several painters left the hall in despair and retreated to the entrance of the hall. He was so weak that he even fell down and was extremely embarrassed. Mao Yanxiao never dreamed that Emperor Han Yuan seemed to have changed his temper today and specifically wanted to see the ugly girl by name. After a while, Wang Zhejian came holding the pipa and entered the hall. Even though Xiaopinggan had seen too many beauties, when he saw Wang Zhejian at this moment, his eyes lit up. Wang Zhejian entered the hall. As soon as he entered, the whole hall was like a pearl rolling in, and the whole hall became alive and bright. Wang Zhejian, who entered the main hall, was carefully dressed up and looked even more luxurious, beautiful, and elegant. The Chinese people use the word Shen Yu Luo Yan to describe the appearance of a stunning woman. The illusion of Luo Yan comes from Wang Zhejian. When the flying geese saw Wang Zhejian on the ground, they couldn't help but drop down to take a closer look. His hands are like catkins, his skin is like gelatin, his collar is like a caterpillar, his teeth are like gourds and rhinoceros, his head is like a rhinoceros, he has a charming smile, and his beautiful eyes are full of hope. Even this poem cannot describe half of Wang Zhejian's beauty. The moment he saw Wang Zhejian, Xiaopinggan finally understood why Emperor Han Yuan got so angry after seeing Wang Zhejian that he killed all the palace painters including Mao Yanqiao. Damn, such a once-in-a-lifetime beauty was actually killed by you guys. This guy paints an ugly girl and dares to trick me. This is the crime of deceiving the emperor. If I don't kill you, who will I kill? Wang Zhejian looked at Xiaopinggan looking at him with burning eyes, a little shy on his face, and his rosy complexion made Zhejian look more delicate than a flower, but Wang Zhejian still gave an audience to Xiaopinggan gracefully. Queen Qiu of Nanjun has met your majesty. Can you play the pipa? Xiaopinggan asked. Learn a little bit. Okay, you can play a song for me here, I want to hear it. I wonder what song your majesty would like to hear. I will listen to whatever you play. Xiaopinggan smiled slightly. Come here and give me a stool. An eunuch brought a stool and asked Wang Zhejian to sit in front of Xiaopinggan. Wang Zhejian's face turned redder. For Xiaopinggan, it is a rare experience to hear Wang Zhejian play the pipa with his own ears. With so many world beads integrated, this world pearl is the most satisfying. Seeing the emperor for the first time, Wang Zhejian was a little nervous, but he quickly calmed down. He held the pipa and put on his armor. With a move of his fingers, the whole hall was like thousands of jade beads falling on a jade plate, and the beautiful sound of the piano came from the gurgling water flowed out from under her green onion-like fingers, causing the entire hall to become silent. Wang Zhejian played Li Yanyan's beauty song, which is a repertoire of court music. As the pipa played, Wang Zhejian revealed his jade teeth, opened his red lips slightly, and began to sing, "There is a beauty in the north, peerless and independent, looking at King Grand City, then looking at King Grand Country. I would rather not know a beautiful city and a beautiful country, beautiful women are rare to find." This Han Dynasty UFO song is sung slowly, word for word, with a melodious voice. There are many changes and vocal techniques between the words. Sometimes one sentence is sung multiple times, unlike the popular music of later generations. The song has such a fast tempo. Listening to Wang Zhejian playing and singing beauty song lasted 5 or 6 minutes. Xiaopinggan exhaled a long breath. Even if nothing fell from this world pearl and failed in the end, it would be a worthwhile trip to listen to Wang Zhejian play and sing at this time. After playing the song, Xiaopinggan was immersed in Wang Zhejian's superb skills. After Wang Zhejian stopped for half a minute, Xiaopinggan clapped alone and praised loudly, "This song can only be played in heaven, not in the world smell." "Thank you for the compliment, Your Majesty." Wang Zhejian stared at the ground shyly. Xiaopinggan asked the eunuch next to him to take out the portrait Mao Yanqiao drew for Wang Zhejian and show it to Wang Zhejian. It was probably the first time that Wang Zhejian saw his portrait like this, and his face was filled with shock. "How did you offend that Mao Yanqiao, and he actually painted you like this?" Those painters ask for bribes when painting portraits of beautiful ladies. I just refuse to bribe him and don't want to be blackmailed by him. I didn't expect. Wang Zhejian bit his lip and said, "My sister, you are so beautiful, but your temper is too stubborn. Moreover, the fight in this palace, do you think it is just that you don't give this Mao Yanqiao money? Those beautiful ladies can bribe Mao Yanqiao to let Mao Yanqiao control it. If you draw something good looking, you can naturally give him money to paint you ugly." Xiaopinggan shook his head, his face turned cold. "Bring Mao Yanqiao." A few minutes later, Mao Yanqiao was brought in again. When Mao Yanqiao took one look at Wang Zhejian and his portrait, and then looked at Xiaopinggan with a cold expression, he was so frightened that he peed his pants and cried bitterly. As soon as he entered the hall, he knelt on the ground. He walked a few steps on the ground with his knees, kowtowing to Xiaopinggan and Wang Zhejian. His forehead bled from the knock, staining the ground red, and he kept slapping himself in the face. Mao Yanxiao, you are so courageous. You actually dared to deceive me. You dared to kill people with a pen when you failed to ask for bribes. You should be executed for the crime of deceiving the emperor. Xiaopinggan looked at Mao Yanxiao and said coldly. Your Majesty, please spare your life, Your Majesty, spare your life. Xiaopinggan looked at Wang Zhejian. Wang Qiang, this Mao Yanxiao is greedy and committed the crime of deceiving the emperor. It is the most abominable crime. He almost destroyed you. I will hand him over to you now and kill him as you please. Do you want to? How do you want me to deal with him? Wang Zhejian glanced at the palace painter who was kneeling and kowtowing, his face covered with blood. There was an unbearable look in his eyes. He turned his face and sighed, seeing that he has been painting diligently for your Majesty in the palace these years. Please forgive me, he has a life, don't ruin his life because of me, I would really feel uneasy. Xiaopinggan looked at Mao Yanxiao. Apart from Wang Qiang not bribing you, are there any other reasons for you to vilify Wang Qiang? Because Wang Qiang is too delicate and beautiful, several beautiful ladies were afraid that Wang Qiang would compete with them, so they gave me money and asked me to deliberately paint Wang Qiang to be ugly. Mao Yanxiao explained everything, saying it several times in one breath. Among the names of beautiful girls, there is the beautiful girl named Fu. Wang Zhejian's face turned slightly pale when he heard this, and he clenched his fist suddenly, as if he finally understood something. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 464. I didn't expect that the time to fuse this world bead would be so fast. Xiaopinggan in the secret room opened his eyes and looked at the pocket watch on his body. It only took less than 15 minutes to fuse the world bead. It added 16 points to the upper limit of his divine power, bringing his upper limit to 7,760 points. There was another building in the secret mandala, called Beimei Pavilion. Wang Zhejian lived in that Beimei Pavilion and was the first resident of Beimei Pavilion. Xiaopinggan smiled slightly and waved his hand, and Wang Zhejian, who was wearing a long palace dress with pearls on his head, walked out of the mist beside him. He was beautiful and generous, with lively eyes. He looked the same as in the world pearl. It's really eye-catching, and looks absolutely no different from real people. See you, Your Majesty. The summoned Wang Zhejian put his hands together on his chest, bent his knees slightly, and bowed to Xiaopinggan gracefully. Moreover, this Wang Zhejian has the same name as the summoned Wang Zhejian that Xiaopinggan saw in the director's hall before, but his appearance and figure are completely different. The Wang Zhejian in front of him, in Xiaopinggan's eyes, seems to be the real one. Wang Zhejian. Xiaopinggan didn't know why this happened. The beauties summoned by the beauty world pearl were indeed thousands of people with thousands of faces. Different people summoned different people. It was so strange. Xiaopinggan guessed that this might be the same as the summoner. Various performances after becoming Emperor Yuan of the Han dynasty in the world of Jizu are related to the actions taken. Zhejian, what can you do? Xiaopinggan looked at Wang Zhejian in front of him and couldn't help but ask. These only summoned characters have no visible attributes and no idea what they can do. Piano, chess, calligraphy and painting, poems and songs, dancing and kujia, whatever you like is fine. Wang Zhejian looked at Xiaopinggan, slightly shy, and lowered his eyes. I see that your Majesty has a big city, and there are many things in the city. There is the Saint Master Hall, and I can learn everything from the books in the Saint Master Hall. If the Lord wants me to learn other skills, such as managing accounts, running an industry, and spooning soup with my bare hands, I can also. Books in the Saint Master's Hall? What book? Xiaopinggan was stunned. He hadn't been to the Holy Master's Hall for many days, and he didn't notice when there were books in the Holy Master's Hall. After hearing what Wang Zhejian said, Xiaopingyan closed his eyes and re-entered the secret mandala with his whole mind. He suddenly came to the Holy Master's hall, where he saw a lot of books. Those books are placed on the bookshelf behind the main hall of the Saint Master's hall for people to borrow. Just when Xiaopingyan's eyes shifted to the Holy Master's hall, he saw Kang Ji calmly enter the Holy Master's hall and put a volume of Medicine Alliance on the bookshelf. Those books were compiled by Kangja into categories and recorded the experiences and achievements of all the world beads he had integrated. They are placed here volume by volume. They look like biographies in history books, but they are not entirely. The complete books include the Analects of Confucius, Sheneng's Baikojing, 2 chapters of Bianqiu's Inner Canon and Bianqiu's Weijing, and the Water Classic of Deu. There are also some scattered books and articles in different categories, such as Yan Ying's interpretation of dreams, Tian Guang's theory of Yang, Chengmen Lixiu and other stories, as well as the wool invented in the world bead that Xiaopingyan summoned Fenjiun iron cavalry. The method of making cloth, the casting of stirrups, etc. are all placed on the bookshelves according to different categories. The more world beads you fuse and the more characters you become, the richer the collection of books in the Saint Master Hall will be. Xiaopingyan saw Confucius's students teaching the peasant soldiers he summoned in the Holy Master's Hall to learn calligraphy. Could this Holy Master Hall still allow those summoned from the secret mandala to learn new skills? It's interesting. It's true that there is no distinction between education and distinction. Withdrawing from the Saint Master Hall, Xiaopingyan laughed loudly, grabbed Wang Zhejian's warm hand, gently pulled Wang Zhejian over, sat on his lap, and took a deep breath in Wang Zhejian's delicate fragrance. His tone was, "You can learn whatever you want. In the future, if you have nothing to do, just chat with me, talk, play the pipa and sing." With a wave of his hand, Wang Zhejian returned to the secret mandala. Xiaopingyan was in a good mood. This beauty world pearl was indeed a blessing for the summoner. When a beauty like Wang Zhejian was troubled, he could summon Wang Zhejian to chat, play, and sing a song. It was like a private concert for a star. It will be the same, this kind of treatment is enjoyed by the emperor. After sending Wang Zhejian away, Xiaopingyan began to prepare for the secret method of clone. He recalled the assassins and Xuanhuan in the secret room to the secret mandala, then took out a dagger and began to set up a soul protection barrier in the secret room. There are similarities and differences between the state of the clone secret method and the fused world bead. When the world bead is fused, the body has no ability to sense or act at all, but in the clone secret method state, the soul protection barrier can protect it. His current body will not be taken away by others, and at the same time, even in the clone state, his spirit body can sense abnormalities in the environment of his body to a certain extent, and can return to this body as quickly as possible. Among them, this is the necessary preparation for the secret method of clone. Because it may take a long time to complete the clone secret method this time, even if the summoned Xuanhuan and assassins stay, their plane arrival time will be quickly consumed, so Xiaopingyan directly summoned Xuanhuan and assassins back. Under the blessing of the secret method, Xiaopingyan held the finger in one hand, and the dagger in the other hand was shining. Xiaopingyan surrounded himself with the dagger and drew 5 circles around himself. The 5 circles were the soul power and the blessing of the secret method, once drawn with a dagger, turned into 5 thin circles of light exuding a faint brilliance, shrouding Xiaopingyan's body. This is the soul power protection barrier. After the formation of the barrier was completed, Xiaopingyan put away the dagger, followed the requirements of the secret method of avatars, formed a divine silence mudra with both hands, gradually closed his eyes, slowed down his breathing, and in just a moment, Xiaopingyan's body entered in the realm of fetal breath and spiritual silence. In this realm, the time of his body seems to be frozen. His heart only beats once in a few minutes, and his breathing is as thin as a gossamer, vague and absent, maintaining the lowest level. The energy consumption, entering the mysterious realm, in this state, his body can remain in this state for more than 10 years without any problems. After completing the body's fetal breath and divine silence, the preparation for the secret method of avatar in this world was completed, and Xiaoping'an's spirit body entered the spirit world temple, passed through the arch, and returned to the fortress. Mulao was waiting for Xiaoping'an in the fortress. He had been waiting for several days and was even a little anxious. Last time Xiaoping'an left the fortress, he said he would go back to the material world to complete preparations for the secret method of clones. He didn't expect to be away for several days. "Your Majesty, are you okay?" "It's okay, I encountered a little accident and was delayed." "It's okay," Mr. Mu nodded and looked up at the sky full of spiritual bodies and stars. "The clone's body is not easy to find. It may take a long time to find a suitable target." "Your Majesty, you can start now." "Yes," Xiaoping'an nodded, looked up at the stars in the sky, and the next second, Xiaoping'an flew up into the void, and his whole body gradually became transparent until the human body disappears completely and merges into the Qingming of the spiritual world. Xiaoping'an is using the secret method of clone technique to look for those dead people whose star spirits dissipate in their sleep. When those people die in their sleep, the star spirits in the sky will turn into meteors, falling from the sky. Flashed by. Only those who have died in their sleep for no more than 6 hours can become Xiaoping'an's clone, and that body must be human and masculine like Xiaoping'an's spirit body before it can be used. Although we have experienced catastrophes and disasters one after another, there are still several billion people on the earth. Among these billions, people die every day, but in fact, not many people die in their sleep. Most of them die in their sleep. When people die, it is usually because of accidents, various diseases, pain, and other tortures. Some elderly people will leave peacefully in their sleep and turn into meteors in the sky of the spiritual world to say their final farewell to this world. However, when those old people leave, their bodies are already old and weak. Not worth much use. Therefore, the best clone should not be too old and die in his sleep. Such a clone is actually not easy to find. For more than 10 days, Xiaoping'an used secret methods to sense dozens of people who left this world peacefully in their sleep. Most of those people were elderly people, and there was also a woman who was not old, but left behind body Xiaoping'an cannot be used either. Until the 16th day when Xiaoping'an entered the spirit world this time, in the sky somewhere, a meteor streaked across the sky. Like a person waiting for a discount on products in a specialty store, Xiaoping'an finally sensed a person who left this world in his sleep. The man was in his 30s and his body was available. Earth, I'm back. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 465. The blood moon has just ended, and a lonely and rusty iron tower stands in the city. In the sky in the background of the iron tower is the thick smoke in the city that has not completely dissipated. Worn tires are piled together and ignited. The effect is the same as that of ancient wolf smoke. Paris at this moment is a city that is difficult to describe in simple words. Since the 927 bloody incident 2 years ago, the largest city in Europe has embarked on the road of autonomy and has become full of revolutionary atmosphere. All government agencies in the city have been evacuated and will never come back. It is extremely dangerous to appear in or around the city wearing government military and police uniforms and say that you are a government employee. It is generally difficult for such people to survive more than 24 hours. The citizens of Paris who were abandoned in the disaster before, various strange organizations, prison escapees, gangsters, foreign snobbery, and a somewhat capable summoner have completely taken over the city, and are extremely hostile to those who escaped during the disaster. A government that built doomsday bunkers and killed thousands of citizens. The surviving Parisian citizens described the tragedy as a massacre of Parisian citizens blocked on the road by cowardly and shameless politicians in order to escape. The remains of armored vehicles on the streets still tell the story of the tragedy. Those who survived the chaos and the Holy Spirit spent 2 years gradually building their own order in the city. Paris's airport was reopened a year ago. The terrifying space invasion suddenly came to an abrupt end. Although the monsters have not been eliminated, the evil and dark forces are still ready to move, and are even more raging in some places. However, after the disaster, the human countries still got a short period of respite and recovery. After all, as long as people live, they have to live. To the southwest of the Eiffel Tower, close to the Seine River and the outskirts of the city, is a large civilian area of the city. When the first ray of sunshine in the morning shines on the pointed church roof in the civilian area, although there are still the black smoke did not dissipate, but the entire civilian area gradually became lively. All kinds of noisy sounds and all kinds of market atmosphere began to surge in the civilian area. Countless people living in this city began to rush for life and survival. The 2 fat pigs that were driven into the street by the butcher made the narrow street in the civilian area a mess, causing a lot of yelling and a group of envious looks. Due to the lack of energy and various living materials, the whole of Paris, to a certain extent, seems to have returned to the way it was 200 years ago. Sewage flows across the streets in the urban areas, and people who can be seen on the streets in the city can still run. There were only a few cars, the vendors who were doing business carried guns on their backs, and the butchers who drove the pigs had submachine guns in their hands. Everything was full of magic. The butcher and the fat pig passed through a place called Rose Street and past a small cheap hotel called the Old Man and the Sea. At this moment, at the end of the corridor on the second floor of the small hotel, the hotel owner Garcia was using a slightly rude and fat word. He knocked hard on the door of the room with the bronze medal number 206 hanging on it, shouting loudly in half-baked Chinese. The poor door groaned in pain under the hard knocks of the hotel owner, as if it was about to fall apart at any time. The hotel owner didn't feel bad at all. His patience had long since run out. His screams echoed throughout the small hotel, and even people on the street outside heard them. "Mr. Luo, I know you are in the room. You said that you will have to pay the rent for the past month after the blood month. I have given you a week's grace. This is the greatest kindness you can do considering your identity as a painter." No matter how the hotel owner shouted outside, no one answered inside. After knocking on the door for a while, he was probably afraid that the poor door would fall down and cost him a lot of money to repair it. Garcia, the hotel owner, gasped heavily. Angry, he finally stopped torturing that door. "Tomorrow, I will give you another day. If you can't pay the rent after tomorrow, I will call the security team. If you are thrown into the collective farm, I won't be able to care about your dignity at that time." After saying these words, the fat hotel owner finally muttered and left the door of room 206. The old floorboards creaked under the owner's steps. It seemed that the noise outside finally woke up the people in the room. At this moment, the people in the room faintly woke up from the floor and opened their eyes. Xiaopingan looked at everything in front of him, his mind was temporarily blank. His last memory was still in the last image of the secret method of clone in front of him. On the floor next to him, there was a chair that had fallen to the ground, a broken rope, 2 empty wine bottles, and a bottle of ampills. Xiaopingan looked up and saw another length of rope hanging on the beam. The chair that fell on the ground, the half-cut rope hanging from the beam, and a burst of chaotic memories suddenly poured into Xiaopingan's mind. In this memory, Xiaopingan saw that he had drunk a lot of wine, poured some medicine into his mouth randomly, then walked up to the chair numbly, put his neck in the hanging rope, and then flopped ashore like the salted fish stepped on the chair and began to struggle painfully and suffocatingly on the rope. The rope snapped, and he fell off the chair, hitting his head hard on the ground. The owner of this body, named Luoan, is a Chinese student studying painting in Paris. A painter is one of the most difficult groups to survive in troubled times. No one can even save their lives and they are still hungry. Who can care about painting? The feeling on his neck was very uncomfortable. Xiaopinggan touched his neck and found that there was a burning mark just under his chin, near his Adam's apple. In Xiaopinggan's opinion, this body is really weak. A person who is not even a summoner. His physical strength is like an ant in Xiaopinggan's opinion. This body is still slowly adapting to the intrusion into the body. The powerful spirit within. In addition to the burning sensation on the neck, the body's musculoskeletal meridians are also slowly changing. This adaptation process means that this body will gradually and slowly undergo a terrifying and long process of divine power empowerment and physical destruction. This process will take about half a month to a month. Because of Xiaopinggan's powerful spiritual body, he can slowly create and cultivate a powerful body by himself. In just a moment, with the changes in his body, Xiaopinggan felt that the burning sensation on his neck became more and more acute, which was a sign that the sensory ability of the body's nerve endings was increasing. Xiaopinggan struggled to get up and stumbled to a mirror in the room. He couldn't wait to see what he looked like in the mirror. The person in the mirror turned out to be a completely unfamiliar Chinese face. It was a Chinese man, wearing a white shirt, with somewhat messy black hair, melancholic and somewhat dazed black eyes, a straight nose, about 30 years old, with clear lines on his face, and even a little, handsome. It's just that the face of the person in the mirror has a sickly paleness, as if he hasn't seen the sun for many days, and his body is not strong, showing the weakness of a scholar. The dark red mark was on his neck, which was very dazzling. Looking at the man in the mirror, Xiaopinggan touched his face. He showed a smile and said, "Don't worry, this body will be left to me from now on, and I won't waste it like you." Looking at the face in the mirror, Xiaopinggan felt that the picture was a bit funny, but he couldn't laugh. The tearing pain in his head suddenly appeared, and the pain was still increasing. Xiaopinggan held his head and let out a painful groan. His body shook twice. In the tearing pain in his head, more memories poured into Xiaopinggan's head. This is an inevitable process of the clone technique, which is a bit uncomfortable. His spirit body is gradually adapting to this body, and at the same time, it will also browse some memories of this body. A woman's face suddenly appeared in Xia Yang's head. "Oh, my dear Olivia. This is not suicide, it is tragic, desperate, and pitiful, sacrifice for love, the lover got married, and the groom is not me. Since I can't stay with my beloved for the rest of my life, then let me use my life to make you remember it forever." Xiaopinggan looked at the pale and weak face in the mirror, panting heavily, grabbing the table in front of him with both hands, his knuckles turned white. After 7 or 8 minutes, the tearing sound came from his brain. The labor pain gradually decreased and eased bit by bit. Xiaopinggan glanced around the room, looking for some medicine for injuries. Unfortunately, the room was empty. This small hotel was too simple. Almost everything was visible at a glance, including a bed, a desk, and a wardrobe, a chair. That's all the furnishings in the room. Moreover, in Luoan's memory, he did not have money to buy expensive medicine for injuries. At this moment, medicine in Paris was more expensive than imagined. Although this guy Luoan is poor, he loves to be clean, and he is probably still a patient with obsessive-compulsive disorder. Even if he wants to hang himself, everything in the room is neatly packed, and the quilt on the bed is folded meticulously, without a single wrinkle. The red oak desk was spotless, with books, pens, inks and papers arranged in a straight line. A mobile phone with a broken screen was neatly placed on the desk, opposite the books. There is a piece of paper on the desk, and a pendant is pressed on the paper. Xiaopinggan walked to the desk and picked up the silver enamel pendant. The pendant could be opened, and inside there was a 1-inch profile photo of Olivia's head. The Olivia in the photo was an exotic girl. Beauty, Olivia stood in front of the Eiffel Tower, wearing a peaked cap and a blue dress. She had a little baby fat on her face, but her facial features were very beautiful. The piece of paper pressed under the pendant was Ron's last love poem written in French to Olivia. As a painter, Xuanhuan can write beautiful gutling calligraphy, which is pleasing to the eye. The love poem is as follows. What can I do to keep you? I give you the streets of poverty, the sunsets of despair, the blood moons of run-down urban areas. I give you the sorrow of a person who has been looking at the lonely moon for a long time. I give you my dead ancestors, whose ghosts are commemorated in marble, my father's father who was killed on the border, with 2 bullets through his chest. Bearded, he died, and the soldiers wrapped his body in cowhide. My mother's grandfather, who was 24 years old at the time, led soldiers to charge against the monsters on the Loess Plateau. Now he has become a ghost on horseback who has disappeared. I give you all the insight I can have in the books I write, all the manliness or humor I can have in my life, and all the humility I can have. I give you the loyalty of a man who has never had faith. I give you my chest full of fire and the sea water that can engulf this world. I give you the core of myself that I have managed to preserve, a core that is untouched by words, untreated by dreams, untouched by time, joy, and adversity. I give you the memory of a yellow rose I saw one evening many years before you were born. I give you explanations for yourself, theories about yourself, real and amazing news about yourself. I give you my loneliness, my darkness, my heart's hunger. I try to impress you with confusion, danger, failure. Note 1. At the bottom of the poem, there are 2 additional lines of words. The handwriting is a bit blurry, as if tears dripped on it, but the tears have dried, leaving only a vague mark. My dear Olivia, if I can't give you these, then I hope to use my life to live in your heart forever young and wish you happiness. This is the last poem I write for you. Love you forever, Xuanhuan. Looking at Xuanhuan's last poem in this world, Xiaopinghan was a little moved. Xuanhuan, this impoverished painter, is definitely an infatuated person. But isn't this infatuated man afraid that the woman will have nightmares at night after reading the suicide note? Hanging is the most ugly way to die. After death, the tongue will stick out. Death is the most unworthy. As long as you live, there is hope. Also, this guy owed money to the hotel owner. Not only did he not pay back the money, he almost turned his guest room into a haunted house before he died. It was so unkind. Xiaopinghan picked up the phone with a broken screen and looked at it. The phone could no longer be turned on and had no power. In Paris nowadays, charging is a very luxury thing. The books on the desk are all works on art or poetry and philosophy, and none of them are related to making money and survival. Xiaopinghan stood in front of the desk for 2 minutes. Then, Xiaopinghan heard his stomach growl. This is because of the idling and peristalsis of the intestines caused by hunger. It is also the body's protest and reminder to Xiaopinghan that this body is too weak. The transformation of the body by the spirit body requires a lot of food and calories. When Xiaopinghan woke up just now, he felt that there was still a lot of alcohol left in his body, and his head was still a little confused, but after a while, the alcohol seemed to be digested, and his head became clearer and clearer. Yesterday, poor Xuanhuan locked himself in his room and didn't eat anything for a whole day, but drank 2 bottles of wine. The need and pressure of survival suddenly hit us. Xiaopinghan tried to sense his secret mandala, because the spirit body and body had not fully adapted, and the secret candid was still trembling, and it was completely unusable. He must find a way to get through these days of adapting his spiritual body to his physical body. Once he gets used to it, he will be the only summoner of the 6 Yang realm on this planet, the undisputed strongest man in the world. Note 1, What Can I Do to Keep You by Borges, slightly modified. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 466. Half an hour later, Xiaopinghan, who was dressed again, walked out of the hotel room door. Before leaving the room, Xiaopinggan tidied everything in the room. He stepped on the chair, untied the rope from the beam in the room, threw it into the glove box, and put away the scattered wine bottles. If the hotel owner saw the broken rope hanging on the beam and the scar on his neck, I don't know what the Philistine and bad-tempered hotel owner would do. As for his current identity, from the moment he walked out of this room, he could only be Roan, a down-and-out painter staying in Paris. At this time, the hunger in the stomach becomes more urgent. Without food, the time for the body to adapt to the spirit body will be prolonged and recovery will be very slow. This is what Xiaopinggan does not want to see. There is a kettle in the room. In the past half hour, Xiaopinggan only drank a little water. Even this small amount of water was quickly absorbed by Xiaopinggan's body, which slightly relieved his thirst. However, the feeling of hunger was still there. Xiaopinggan felt that the hunger in his stomach was like fire, and the feeling in his stomach was burning. The acid surged up in waves and was already unbearable. Xiaopinggan pinched his pocket. There was no money in his pocket. The last of Luoan's wealth had been exchanged for wine. In Paris at this time, it was popular to barter, or trade with precious metals such as gold and silver. As for the euros in circulation, their value had been greatly reduced. Some places did not even accept banknotes, only precious metals, because Europe was in chaos. I heard that many banks were robbed by gangsters and gangs during the previous chaos. I heard that some people also produced a lot of counterfeit banknotes, which are not so easy to use. Xiaopinggan was wearing the most decent clothes he could find. The shirt inside was the linen shirt he wore when he hanged himself. Outside the shirt was a black windbreaker jacket. It was also a little old. It should have not been dry cleaned for a long time. On the bed, Xiaopinggan found an old blue scarf to cover the scars on his neck. Crunch, crunch. The cracked stair slab made a tooth-breaking sound when Xiaopinggan walked by. The sound was so harsh that it was like an alarm, which made Xiaopinggan's caution useless. Sure enough, when Xiaopinggan walked downstairs, he saw the owner of the hotel, Garcia, standing at the corner of the stairs in a leisurely manner, holding his arms and looking at Luoan with a pair of greasy little eyes. "Mr. Painter, are you finally willing to give up?" Garcia's thick arm stretched out and opened his hand in front of Luoan. "It's time to pay last month's rent. You can ask the security team to take me away now and throw me to the farm to do hard labor." Xiaopinggan looked at Garcia calmly. His eyes were not panic at all, but slightly oppressive. "As a result, you will lose money for 1 month's rent, you get an enemy, and you get nothing else." Garcia looked at Luoan with some surprise, feeling that this down-and-out painter who was usually submissive and cautious in front of him seemed a little strange today, actually daring to talk to him like this. Just when Garcia raised his eyebrows and was about to get angry, Xiaopinggan's voice rang again. "It's not easy to make money in Paris at this time, and there are not many people staying in your small hotel. I know you are also in difficulty. I think we should establish a relationship of trust and tide over the difficulties together. You continue to guard your hotel, and I'm going out today to find a way to make money to pay your rent. What do you think?" The hotel owner looked at Luoan with suspicion, and hesitated for a moment. "Are you really willing to go out and make money, instead of just selling your crappy oil paintings that no one wants?" These days, Luoan has also thought of ways to survive, and even set up a stall on the street for people to draw pictures. However, life is still becoming increasingly difficult. In the opinion of the hotel owner, the profession of painter is completely useless in this chaotic situation and is too stupid. Ahem, people have to learn to change. I am adapting now. Since I can't make money by painting, I will find a job that I can do and work hard to make money for you to pay your rent. As long as it is a job that makes money, everyone is willing to give it a try. You don't just want to run away, do you? The hotel owner looked at Xiaopinggan with some suspicion. "My belongings and those paintings are still in the room. Besides, Where can I run to now? At least this place is safe and can be lived in. I won't be so stupid. Luoan's expression was very calm. The hotel owner finally believed his words and the expression on his face was no longer so serious. Mr. Luoan, I hope you can keep your word. I will wait for you here and see when you come back in the evening what can you earn. I haven't eaten for a day. Before I leave, please bring me a breakfast of sufficient size so that I can have the strength to work. The innkeeper's eyebrows rose again, about to get angry, and a curse word came to his mouth. But he blinked and held it back, because Xiaopingan had already thrown the silver enamel pendant to him. There's no problem in exchanging this for a meal. There is also a photo of Olivia in the pendant, but that photo is meaningless to Xiaopingan. Olivia is just a stranger and has nothing to do with him now. The hotel owner took the pendant, checked it, weighed it with his hands, and blinked. Silver. Well, my most beloved thing is now given to you. Okay, this can be exchanged for a meal. Just sit there and wait, and I'll get you something to eat. On the first floor of the hotel near the street, there are a few small tables where people can drink and eat. The bar of the small hotel is empty and there is no wine, but there is still some food in the store. Xiaopingan sat and waited for a while, and the hotel owner brought him a breakfast. A crusty piece of rye almond bread, a glass of milk, and nothing else. Xiaopingan was not picky and just took a big bite. The bread was a little hard, and there was even a little wheat bran in the bread. As for the milk, although it was hot, Xiaopingan took a sip and knew that it had been mixed with a lot of water. And no sugar. But no matter what, after eating these things, although he was not full yet, the hunger in his stomach was not so imminent. Xiaopingan felt that he had regained a little strength and his body felt much better. Xiaopingan ate the last crumbs of bread and the milk mixed with water in the cup, then stood up, straightened his clothes, and walked out of the small hotel. Let's get money and food first. As for Xiaoning and the others, they will think about it after they settle down. The street outside the small hotel was a bit chaotic. Remaining building ruins and garbage could be seen everywhere. Sewage flowed across small ditches. Signboard shops and hotels are lined up on both sides of the street. Everyone is busy, everyone is cold and alert. Several old and lustful prostitutes are standing on the street with their thighs exposed early in the morning, carrying guns. People can be seen everywhere. After walking a few hundred meters outside, Xiaopingan saw the security team here. More than a dozen young people wearing armbands carrying weapons such as rifles and submachine guns came from the front, scanning the crowd on the street, and also showing his status in this residential area. The security team is protecting the safety of residential areas, so people in residential areas and shops in various industries will also regularly pay taxes to the security team, which is actually paying protection fees. When there is a security team in a place, all kinds of gangsters, and criminals will not dare to cause trouble at will. Public security is relatively guaranteed. Above the security team, there are various organizations in Paris. The security team is only responsible for maintaining the underlying order. At this moment in Paris, even if it is broad daylight, you can still occasionally hear the echo of gunshots coming from the city, but everyone has become accustomed to it and is a little numb. Xiaopingan had actually thought of how to get money. Luoan had been robbed twice by a few gangsters on a street outside this civilian area. Once, his glasses were broken. The security there was a bit chaotic. He was going to go fishing, go rob those gangsters. Those people should have more money than him. When passing by a building ruins, Xiaopingan found a half-meter-long water pipe with an elbow from the ruins and hid it in his windbreaker. His body had not fully recovered yet. This thing was useful. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 467. When walking out of the civilian area, Xiaopingan felt that the world he saw with his eyes gradually became clearer. Luoan's eyes were more than 300 degrees myopic. He had just eaten something and replenished a little energy. His two bodies were fused. The speed has quietly increased, and the short-sighted eyes have quietly recovered. At the same time, the physical strength and quality of the body have also improved a little, at least there is no such weak feeling as before. Less than 20 minutes after leaving the civilian area, Xiaoping'an arrived at the chaotic neighborhood. This neighborhood belonged to the town of Issy in Paris. Half of the surrounding town had been destroyed and everything was in ruins. The once romantic city is not romantic at all at this time and is full of criminals. Xiaoping'an was just strolling around the streets nearby. In the blink of an eye, 3 black gangsters wearing sweatshirts suddenly rushed out from the alley next to them. One was holding a knife, and the other was holding a pistol. He resisted Xiaoping'an and pushed Xiaoping'an roughly into the alley next to him. "Boy, hurry up and take out the valuable things on you." The black gangster who spoke had thick lips, a sinewy face, and a somewhat fat body. He had a strong bad breath when he opened his mouth. He pointed his pistol horizontally. Xiaoping'an's chest commanded in very proficient Chinese, "Watch, ring, money, mobile phone, everything." Just from what the black man said, Xiaoping'an could tell that this was not the first time this guy had robbed Chinese people in Paris. He would not have developed such a proficient Chinese accent without robbing dozens of times. "Hurry up." Another gangster stood behind Xiaoping'an, holding a dagger against Xiaoping'an's vest. A gangster stretched out his hands and quickly searched Xiaoping'an's body. Except for the steel pipe in the windbreaker, Xiaoping'an had nothing on him. The gangster who was searching the body suddenly touched the steel pipe in Xiaoping'an's windbreaker. He was slightly startled. With his other hand, he pulled out the steel pipe and hit the gun-wielding gangster in the face with the stick. With this stick, Xiaoping'an has used all the strength of this body. The strength is really not light. The gangster holding the gun suddenly collapsed his nose, his teeth were knocked out, and a deep blood mark appeared on his face. He screamed and fell to the ground, fainting. Xiaoping'an had quick eyesight and quick hands. He grabbed the pistol that fell from the gangster's hand. At the same time, he turned his body slightly to avoid the dagger stabbing him from behind. He kicked hard forward with one foot, directly hitting the gangster who was searching him. On the lower abdomen, he kicked the gangster who was searching him until he was foaming at the mouth and kneeling on the ground. His body shrank into a ball of shrimp and he suddenly stopped breathing. Although this body's power response speed is not good, and it cannot compare with the summoner who has just merged with the foundation building world bead, Xiaoping'an's combat awareness is superb. It is completely impossible to deal with such a few gangsters in close combat. No more words. After knocking down the 2 gangsters in the blink of an eye, Xiaoping'an suddenly turned around and took a step back. Before the gangster holding the dagger could stab him a second time, Xiaoping'an's gun was already pointed at the gangster's head. Only one finger has opened the safety. The black gangster's movements suddenly froze, and his face turned slightly pale, but he was saying threatening words and stared at Xiaoping'an fiercely. "Black-haired boy, you are in big trouble. How dare you resist? Do you know who we are? We are from the BG gang. If you dare to touch us, our people can dig you out all over Paris. Even if you hide in the Chinese community in the 11th arrondissement, it will be useless. The 11th arrondissement, the Chinese community in Paris, will soon be invaded by several gangs in Paris. Just wait for our revenge." This gangster spoke French, which Xiaoping'an could understand completely. It didn't matter to Xiaoping'an who the BG gang was. A man who wasn't even afraid of demigods and dominant demons wouldn't care about a small gang. However, Xiaoping'an, the Chinese community in District 11 that the gangster mentioned, didn't react at all, because he hadn't fully absorbed Luoan's memories. He just felt that the name was a bit familiar. After waiting for a few seconds, Xiaoping'an only then did Ping'an react, and related memories emerged in his head. The 11th arrondissement is an area where Chinese are relatively concentrated in Paris. There are more Chinese there. There are many wholesale companies and several large wholesale markets. It is the Chinese in Paris, France. As an important gathering place, Paris is in chaos at the moment. The Chinese in District 11 seem to have organized a security team to maintain security in those wholesale markets and neighborhoods. Are there gangs attacking the Chinese community in District 11? This is the first time Xiaopingan knows this news, and it's quite valuable. Seeing that Xiaopingan didn't speak, the gangster's eyes flashed with pride, thinking that Xiaopingan was afraid, and said, "Relax, aren't you Chinese the most afraid of trouble? Don't get yourself into trouble, give me the gun, you can go." As he spoke, a hand slowly stretched out, trying to grab the pistol in Xiaopingan's hand. Just when the gangster's hand had just grasped the barrel of the gun, Xiaopingan's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule, and then he directly pulled the trigger. Bang! The bullet was shot from the muzzle and directly hit the gangster's outstretched hand. Half of his palm was bruised and bloody. After a brief shock, the gangster suddenly bent down and held the broken hand. The palms wailed. "You are wrong. The last thing I am afraid of is trouble." Xiaopingan said something in French. Just when the gangster raised his head, a steel pipe was slapped on the gangster's face, knocking him to the ground. On the ground, he fainted. In the blink of an eye, the three gangsters fell to the ground, and no one was left standing. Xiaopingan held the gun and watched the changes in the surrounding streets. After waiting for a few minutes, no one came on the street. The pedestrians who heard the gunshots in the alley quickened their pace and left quickly, and other gangsters also. For those who haven't come to check, hearing gunshots here seems to be a common thing. Xiaopingan then searched the three gangsters. The three gangsters had a Glock pistol, 3 magazines, 2 daggers, and actually a military grenade. The grenade was in the pocket of the gangster who was responsible for the body search just now. In addition to these weapons, these three gangsters had more than 2,000 euros in banknotes, 2 gold rings, and a necklace. The gangster who just took the gun was wearing a 70% new gold watch. Not a bad harvest. Xiaopingan put all the things on himself, then swung the steel pipe and broke the kneecaps of the three gangsters' right legs, and then walked towards a nearby restaurant that he remembered was still open. The meager bread and milk he had just eaten in the small hotel were not enough. Xiaopingan was hungry again. He felt that he could eat a cow at this moment. The entire public transportation in Paris has long been paralyzed, so if you want to go somewhere, if you don't have a car, you can only go on 2 legs. Pedestrians in the city move in a hurry. In broad daylight, there is still basic order on the streets, and those gangsters and hooligans have not yet brazenly committed robberies on the streets, because people with guns can be seen everywhere on the streets here, and there are also security teams on the streets. Various missing person notices and recruitment advertisements are plastered on the walls, telephone poles, and bus stops on the street. Down and out painters, unemployed clowns and acrobats are soliciting customers and performing shows on the streets, and they all have something to offer. On the streets, there were almost no complete shops and shops. Those shops and shops were all smashed up, with broken glass everywhere. Many buildings showed signs of arson. Those who were actually operating there are not many shops. There are more than 1 armed security guard standing in front of the shops that are still open, especially those places such as bakeries, butchers, and fruit and vegetable shops. Looking outside, people who don't know may think that there are people guarding the bank's vaults, and some shops even have signs on their doors saying that they only accept precious metals and barter transactions. Xiaopingan finally came to the restaurant in his memory. At the door of the restaurant, there were several burly men with guns standing, and there was even an armored vehicle converted from a pickup truck parked. Under the gaze of those sturdy men, Xiaopingan calmly walked up the steps of the restaurant. A waiter in a black tuxedo came over carrying a tray and bowed slightly. "Sir, the rules of our store are to pay first and consume later. I wonder what you will pay with, sir?" Xiaopingan put the gold watch he had just received on the tray. Give me a meal based on the value of this gold watch. I want high-calorie food. The waiter glanced at the gold watch, with a smile on his face. I understand, sir, please come in. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 468. It's good to have money. Sitting in the restaurant, Xiaopingan sighed in his heart while eating a large plate of 7-season lamb legs in front of him. This 7-season lamb leg is a classic French dish. I heard that the lamb leg is marinated for 7 hours before being stewed, so it tastes very good and does not have the fishy smell of lamb. The number of lamb legs was very large. When placed in front of Xiaopingan, there were almost half of the lamb legs. In addition to the leg of lamb, the cold appetizer is sardines, the soup is oxtail clear soup, the side dish is prawns, and the main course is the generous 7-season lamb leg, which is also paired with a glass of red wine. Xiaopingan ate these things and felt that his body was changing rapidly. With sufficient food supply, the integration of the spirit body and the body was accelerating, and the frequency of the secret mandala's tremors was gradually decreasing. After eating the leg of lamb, Xiaopingan was surprised to find that he could actually have some connection with the secret mandala. As the foundation bead of the secret mandala, the Xuanhuan's world bead has sculptures of the Chao family's world bead and the Sheneng's world bead. The spell position of the totem is becoming more and more clear in my perception. It seems that I can already use a little divine power to use the basic spells brought by these 3 foundation building world beads. As for my body, up to this moment, my physical fitness has returned to the level when I fused the world bead to build the foundation. There have been significant changes in the musculoskeletal meridians of my body. Occasionally, there will be a slight squirming sound from the bones and meridians on my body. The waitress who was pouring wine for him next to him looked at him with suspicious eyes, thinking that his stomach was rumbling. The secret mandala seems to be recovering rapidly in accordance with the order in which it was fused with the world beads, and this body is also recovering at the same speed. Interesting. Although he was still far away from the Yang realm after his recovery, Xiaopingan was very satisfied with being able to use divine power and simple spells, and finally felt a little safer. After finishing the lamb leg and drinking up the soup, Xiaopingan was still satisfied, but the feeling of hunger finally left him. The restaurant then served cauliflower salad and cheese dessert, as well as coffee. Just after finishing the cheese dessert, the restaurant manager walked up to Xiaopingan. The restaurant manager is a middle-aged man in his 40s, wearing a clean and decent dress, with a big belly and a beautiful mustache. His face is a little serious. Sir, are you causing trouble outside? Oh, what's wrong? Xiaopingan was slightly startled. Some gang members came outside our restaurant. Those people seem to be looking for a Chinese man with dark hair. You are now a customer of our restaurant. We will not let those gang members in, but if you go out, we cannot guarantee your safety. It's safe, the restaurant manager said to Xiaopingan, and then looked at his watch. We and they will not offend each other, so sir, you still have 20 minutes to eat. You can finish the cheese and drink in our restaurant. Finish your coffee before leaving. Oh, really? Xiaopingan stood up from the booth and glanced outside through the window not far from the restaurant. During the time he was dining, unknown people were walking on the street outside the restaurant. At that time, there were already 7 or 8 gangsters in sweatshirts, like jackals wandering on the street, staring in the direction of the restaurant from time to time. But those gangsters did not dare to come over, because the modified pickup armored vehicle at the door of the restaurant had a huge deterrent effect. The bodyguards standing at the door of the restaurant were like loyal hounds. Each of them had their hands on their weapons and looked at them with vigilant eyes. Staring at the gangsters wandering outside the restaurant. Judging from the skin color of those gangsters, they should be the same as the 3 guys who robbed them just now. Everything was as expected by Xiaopingan. After knowing that there was a gang behind the 3 gangsters, Xiaopingan deliberately broke their kneecaps and left them alive. The purpose was to let the gangs behind the three gangsters come to him. As for the reason, he only wanted to rob them. Three gangsters, not enough food. His skin color and hair are very conspicuous, and he walked all the way from the place where the accident occurred without covering up. Those gangsters should be able to find him easily. Sure enough, the garbage came so quickly. Xiaopingan sat down, smiled, and said calmly, "I just met three gangsters robbing them, and I smashed their kneecaps. It seems that those gangsters came here, but it doesn't matter. I'll take care of myself after eating leave." Xiaopingan's calmness exceeded the expectations of the restaurant manager. He took a deep look at Xiaopingan. His eyes were like watching a person enjoying the Last Supper. "As a guest of our restaurant, I allow you to enjoy our meal. Leave the restaurant through the back door. Those people outside are members of the BG gang. They are ruthless and can do anything. Sorry, we can only do this." "Thanks." Xiaopingan picked up the coffee leisurely. After drinking 3 cups of coffee, Xiaopingan stood up. A tall and round restaurant waiter came over. "You should have a restroom here." "I want to go to the restroom for convenience," Xiaopingan said. The waiter in the restaurant looked at the restaurant manager in the distance. The restaurant manager looked at the time. It was about 10 minutes before he allowed Xiaopingan to stay in this restaurant, so he nodded slightly. Then, Xiaopingan was the waiter in that restaurant. Escorted to the restroom of the restaurant. The waiter seemed to think that Xiaopingan was trying to play some tricks, and stayed with Xiaopingan, staring closely at Xiaopingan. Only. Xiaopingan went to the bathroom because he really wanted to make himself convenient. After staying in the bathroom for less than 5 minutes, Xiaopingan finished his toilet, washed his hands, and wiped his face. Then, under the escort of the waiter, he walked through an aisle next to the back kitchen of the restaurant and came to the back door of the restaurant. Opening the back door, there was a deserted alley outside, with several trash cans piled in the alley and a few dusty cars. "The manager of the restaurant is already waiting here. There are still 3 minutes left before the 20 minutes he gave Xiaopingan." "Good luck to you, sir," said the restaurant manager. "Thank you. The 7-season lamb leg here is good. I'll try other dishes next time." After Xiaopingan finished speaking, he moved his hands and feet. Without any nonsense, he took out the Glock pistol directly in front of the restaurant manager. He checked the magazine of the pistol, then calmly walked out of the back door, turned around the alley outside the back door, and disappeared in the eyes of the restaurant manager and waiter in the blink of an eye. "Boss, this guy is a tough guy," the restaurant waiter who had been following Xiaopingan to the restroom said to the restaurant manager. "When this guy went to the restroom just now, he was still in the mood to whistle while squatting on the toilet. I asked for an expired newspaper. The ones who survive are the tough ones." The restaurant manager squinted his eyes and glanced at the direction where Xiaopingan disappeared. "How many people from the BG gang came?" 13 of them, all with guys, look like they are ready to kill. If that guy can leave alive, I'll treat him to a bottle of Bordeaux first growth wine the next time he comes." The restaurant manager shrugged and had the back door closed. And almost at the same time that the back door of the restaurant had just closed, a series of crisp gunshots came from the alley not far away. The two sides had exchanged fire, and someone fired. "That black-haired boy is probably dead. I'll notify Leber's body collection team later and have someone collect the body." The restaurant manager sighed regretfully. "I actually quite admire that black-haired boy. That kid is very courageous." In the alley, 3 gangsters who had been shot in the head fell to the ground. Blood gradually spread on the ground, dyeing it a bright red. The 3 gangsters all had pistols in their hands. But just now, when they saw Xiaopingan, the two sides started shooting at each other, and they raised their hands. Without firing a few shots, Xiaopingan fired 3 shots with incomparable accuracy while running. With one burst of fire, 3 people had been headshot. As soon as the three people fell down, Xiaoping's figure rushed over quickly and stood behind a wall behind the three people who fell to the ground, waiting quietly and listening attentively. The moment the gunfire rang out, there were already loud roars and the sound of running feet in the street outside. In the blink of an eye, a gang member wearing a black sweatshirt and a gang member wearing a blue sweatshirt rushed from outside into the alley. The two guys rushed too fast. As soon as they rushed into the alley, they saw three corpses lying on the ground in front of them. The two gangsters were shocked. One gangster with an AK in his hand raised his gun and pointed it at them. Random shooting was fired from the front of the alley, shattering the windows of several cars parked in front of the alley and the places where people could hide, causing debris to fly and sparks flying everywhere. The other gangster quickly hid behind the trash can without anyone seeing him, stretched out his hand from behind the trash can, and fired two random shots at the debris pile in the alley in front. Is this the quality of these gangsters? To be honest, apart from bullying the weak and the weak when there are many people, these gangsters are just rubbish when it comes to fighting skills. Xiaoping was too lazy to talk nonsense. He stood behind the two men, raised his pistol, and fired twice, directly hitting the heads of the two gangsters who were shooting randomly again. The two gangsters fell down and died in an unknown manner. They didn't know why the bullets were shot from behind. Xiaoping rushed to the gangster wearing a blue sweater and picked up the powerful AK submachine gun in the gangster's hand. The magazine of that AK submachine gun has been modified. The original AK magazine has a capacity of 30 rounds, but the magazine of the AK in front of you has been replaced by a modified drum full of strong gangster style. The huge one side of the drum is hollow, and you can see at a glance that the scroll-shaped magazine grooves in the drum are filled with orange-yellow bullets. Such a drum has a capacity of almost 100 rounds. Xiaoping took the AK and rushed out of the alley. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 469. Just as Xiaoping had just rushed out of the alley, all the members of the BG gang on the street 100 meters away suddenly gathered around. There were 8 people in total, 3 on the left side of the street and 5 on the right, with each person's hand on their hands. All armed. The 8 gangsters rushed over when they heard the sound of gunshots. They were shocked when they saw Xiaoping rushing out of the alley. They each raised their guns and fired at Xiaoping. A fierce gun battle suddenly broke out on the street. Da-da-da-da-da. Da-da-da-da. Da-da-da. Those 8 gangsters, 4 pistols and 4 automatic weapons, swiped at them like bullets splashing down on them. When he saw the 8 people on the other side, Xiaoping had already thrown himself behind a tall sycamore tree. The bullets shot from the sycamore tree caused sawdust to fly, the leaves fell, and the ground and walls around the sycamore tree fell. An abandoned shop that was affected was even messed up by those bullets, leaving large craters. Fortunately, this sycamore tree is old and has a very thick trunk. There are so many sycamore trees on the streets of Paris. Bullets from those weapons cannot penetrate the several-foot diameter trunk of the sycamore tree, giving Xiaoping what harm is caused. Debris was flying around Xiaoping like snowflakes. He held the AK in his hand and silently listened to the rhythm of the bullets fired. The 4 automatic weapons on the opposite side all fired at the same time, and they didn't pay attention to any combination. They are a rabble. When a clip of bullets from an automatic weapon is used up, the time to change the clip is when the opponent's firepower weakens. That is the time window for one's own counterattack. Enruto, let's go around. Kill that black-haired boy. Hell, Harry and the other 5 were killed in the alley just now. The gangsters from the BG gang opened their mouths and yelled in the street. At the same time, taking advantage of the large number of people and firepower, they wanted to surround them from both sides. A group of people roared in the street. The opportunity that Xiaopinggan was waiting for came soon. As the bullets of the first submachine gun were fired and turned off, and he was ready to change the magazine, the bullets of the other 3 submachine guns were almost finished at the same time. The firepower that suppressed Xiaopinggan was suddenly a lot weaker. Xiaopinggan suddenly turned out from behind the sycamore tree, holding the heavy AK steadily with his hands like iron pincers. He put his face in front of the gun butt and aimed his eyes at the sight on the gun. He was so calm and frightening that he suddenly became calm. Shoot violently at the 5 people who rushed to the front. Ta da! 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 A bullet passed by, and 2 of the 5 gangsters who rushed to the front fell down at once. Their heads were exploded, and the brains flew into the faces of the people next to them. The remaining 3 fell to the ground in fear, rolled and crawled to hide behind a car, raised their guns, and did not dare to turn their heads. They just shot here randomly, regardless of where the bullets landed. In addition, the 3 people were shocked when they saw Xiaopinggan come out and mow down the 2 people on their side. They quickly found obstacles around them as cover, and then without showing their heads, they fired randomly in the direction of Xiaopinggan. Da! 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 The AK in Xiaopinggan's hand had too many bullets in the magazine, and bullets kept shooting over it, suppressing the remaining gangsters between 2 cars and a wall. Behind the wall, you dare not show your head at all. A gangster's head did not emerge from the back of the car. He just stretched out a hand and shot in this direction with a gun. As soon as that hand stretched out, a bullet fired by Xiaopinggan broke his wrist. His hands were blurred with blood and he screamed loudly. My hand, ah! The gangster's screams were particularly harsh among the gunfire, like a ghost crying and a wolf howling. The power of AK is too great. At such a close distance, a 7.62mm rifle bullet will have terrifying lethality when it hits a person. When the bullet penetrates and explodes, a hole as big as a fist will appear. On the other side, a gangster just stretched out half of the submachine gun body from outside the corner. A bullet came and hit the gun body directly. The submachine gun fell from the gangster's hand, and the parts on the gun body were scattered. Behind a wall, a gangster who had just changed the magazine of his submachine gun mustered up the courage to reveal half of his body and wanted to shoot at Xiaopinggan. As a result, when he came out, his skull was instantly blown away by a bullet, and he fell down. In the corner, the remaining gangsters were shocked. Compared with them, such accurate shooting is completely unparalleled. Even France's elite special forces elites who previously protected the government's evacuation may not have such terrifying shooting standards. A gangster behind the car took out a grenade and threw it towards Xiaopinggan from behind the car. However, as soon as the grenade appeared on the roof of the car, it was already locked by Xiaopinggan. A string of bullets hit it, and the grenade was shot directly in the air. Burst. Boom. The grenade exploded on the car. The gangster hiding behind the car was directly blown up by his own grenade and screamed. His face was covered with broken glass and he rolled out from behind the car. Then he was shot in the head by a bullet. Xiaopinggan moved quickly on the street, holding a gun and shooting accurately, like a machine, terrifyingly calm. Click, 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 click. Just a gun suppressed the firepower of those gangsters, so that those gangsters did not even dare to stick their heads out from behind the obstacle. Halfway through, Xiaopinggan held a gun in one hand and kept shooting. He took out a grenade from before with one hand, opened the grenade's safety, and threw it along the ground behind a wall. Boom! There was an explosion, fire and smoke spurted out violently, and the 2 gangsters hiding behind the wall were blown out by grenades from behind the wall. Xiaopinggan was on the street, shooting one person at a time, hitting those gangsters so hard that they couldn't raise their heads. Xiaopinggan crushed them all the way, suppressed them with bullets and precise shooting, and then bypassed the obstacles where the remaining gangsters were hiding. Appearing on the side of the obstacle, like a hunter hunting prey, headshotting the gangster who was hiding behind the obstacle and shooting randomly outside. When the last gangster was left, he saw Xiaopinggan killing all his companions in the street. The gangster was frightened, yelled, turned around and ran away from behind a sycamore tree. Xiaopinggan chased 2 steps, stood on the street, looked at the direction in which the gangster was escaping, raised the barrel of the gun, and fired a bullet. The gangster had already run more than 50 meters, but a bullet still penetrated his head. Rolled down in the street. The gunshots that had been ringing just now stopped. There was no one on the surrounding streets, and everyone hid when the gunfire rang out. The barrel of the AK was smoking, and there were only a dozen bullets left in the drum. On the more than 200 meters long street and alley, all the gangsters from the BG gang fell to the ground. Looking around at the AK, there was no enemy around. There was also a moaning sound in my ears. Xiaopinggan walked over following the groaning sound, and saw that the gangster who had been blown out from behind the wall by his grenade was still alive. The fragments of the grenade left 7 or 8 wounds on the gangster's body, the most fatal. The wound was on the person's abdomen. The gangster was holding his stomach in vain, like an earthworm that had been exposed to the sun, twisting on the ground, panting heavily, looking at the sky with dull eyes. There was already a large pool of blood under the man's body. If such a wound can be sent to the emergency room immediately for rescue, there is probably a glimmer of hope. However, there is no emergency room in Paris at the moment. Even if there is, it is impossible for such medical resources to save a dying BG. He is just a gangster, so now this guy can only wait for death, wait for his blood to drain, and then slowly die. Xiaopinggan walked to the gangster calmly. The gangster looked at Xiaopinggan walking over with a gun in horror. "Where is the headquarters of your BG gang and how many people are there?" Xiaopinggan asked calmly. The gangster looked at Xiaopinggan, who was looking down at him with wide eyes. He opened his mouth and took a few sharp breaths, but he pursed his mouth tightly and said nothing. Xiaopinggan shot his right knee. The gangster's right knee was directly smashed. After one shot, only 2/3 of the right knee was covered. The gangster rolled and twisted in pain on the ground. "Stand up. Where is the headquarters of your BG gang? How many people are there?" Xiaopinggan continued to ask calmly, turning his gun towards the left knee of the gangster. "In the Fanga building at number 26 Bruno Street, there are more than 200 people from the BG gang." The gangster finally gave in. Xiaopinggan calmly fired another shot, hitting the gangster in the head, ending his pain early. The whole street suddenly became clean. Golden Summoner. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 470. Golden Summoner. Xiaopinggan was collecting trophies quickly. For these gangsters, the trophies are placed in conspicuous places. It is almost easy to find the gold chain around the neck, the gold ring on the hand, the famous watch bracelet on the wrist, etc. Even if you have a little money, you can still see it. Put it in your pocket and find it as soon as you touch it. 5 watches of different prices, 8 pieces of gold chains, diamond rings, gold rings and bracelets, plus an jade pendant and more than 21,000 euros in cash. This is what those 13 gangsters had on them. After searching through it, he put all these things into his pocket. As for weapons, there are many. These gang members have a variety of weapons. The Glock pistol that Xiaopinggan seized before had few bullets left, so he didn't use it anymore. He replaced the Glock pistol with a Beretta 92F. Among the gangsters who were killed, there were 3 people using Beretta 92F. They had 8 pistol magazines with plenty of bullets. A gangster who was headshot was wearing a multifunctional tactical vest equipped by Special Forces. Xiaopinggan also took it off and wore it under his windbreaker. The AK was also replaced by Xiaopinggan, because there were not many bullets in the AK drum, and the other gangsters did not have AK bullets on their bodies. However, Two gangsters had two HK-416CS in their hands and several more on their bodies. Xiaoping'an changed to a HK-416C short-barreled assault rifle. He just hid the HK-416C in his windbreaker. Because the gun body was not long, it could not be seen at all. While searching for things, Xiaoping'an fired a few shots from time to time with the weapons he picked up. Hearing the sound of gunshots, the surrounding streets thought that the battle was not over, and no one dared to show up. By the time Xiaoping'an's quick search was completed, only 3 or 4 minutes had passed. Xiaoping'an fired the bullets of the last pistol he picked up against a wall, then dropped the pistol, touched his harvest, and disappeared into an alley in the blink of an eye. After waiting for a few minutes, I heard that there was no more gunshots here. A few bodyguards came out of the restaurant where Xiaoping'an had just eaten and came to the street to take a look. The scene made everyone who came to check it out shocked. Manager, all 13 members of the BG gang have been killed. 5 of them were in the alley outside the back door of our restaurant, and 8 were on Gray Street outside the alley. None of them escaped. Came out to check the situation. The men returned to the restaurant and reported to the restaurant manager, who was smoking a cigar. What? The restaurant manager was stunned. The hand holding the cigar shook slightly, and the cigar almost fell to the ground. Where is the Chinese with black hair? It's gone, he must have left. How were those people killed? Is that black-haired boy a summoner? The restaurant manager stood up from behind the table. I have checked those corpses. They were all killed by bullets, and many of them had their heads shot. The black-haired Chinese man may be a top professional killer. Only top professional killers can attack so neatly and ruthlessly. They can kill him in such a short time. Kill so many people in a short period of time. The bodyguard replied. Those sons of bitches from the BG gang are in trouble this time. The restaurant manager suddenly laughed, took another puff of his cigar, and exhaled the smoke, informed Lebra and asked Lebra to collect the bodies quickly. The corneas should still be sold for a little more money. At the moment, there are many corpse collection teams on the streets of Paris. The work of the corpse collection team is like the work of vultures on the grassland, keeping the market clean. As for the source of profit of the corpse collection team, that is the organs of the corpse. Corneas can remain on a corpse for several hours and can still be used. As for other corpse organs, it depends on luck. Those that can be removed within 15 minutes are considered superior. Those that can be removed within 15 minutes are of inferior quality. Those that take more than half an hour will be of inferior quality. Then it's basically unusable. Less than 10 minutes after Xiaoping'an left the block here, several vans with red crosses painted on their bodies rushed to the fighting block. Some white coats wearing protective clothing got out of the car, and the bodies on the ground were quickly carried into the car. There is an operating table on the car. A doctor wearing goggles, rubber gloves, spectacles, and a surgical gown holding a scalpel is waiting in the car like a butcher. As soon as the body gets on the car, it is carried to the operating table. The doctor checks it. From the corpse, the usable organs were quickly removed and placed in a specially made refrigerated organ box. As soon as the van arrived, within a few minutes, there was not a single corpse in sight on the street. Even the blood sacrifices had been cleaned up and the ground had been disinfected. The body collection team acted quickly and very professionally. These guys move so fast. On the rooftop of a nearby building, Xiaoping'an was lying on the rooftop, using the scope of the assault rifle to observe the people getting out of the white van. Because of the angle, when the door of one of the vans was opened, the door was facing his direction. He could even see the operating table and the operating table in the van through the light red optical sight. A scene where people are harvesting organs. Kidneys, hearts, corneas, anything that can be used is quickly removed. Xiaoping'an did not leave. He originally wanted to gather around the spot for reinforcements and ambush the gang members of the BG gang again. Unexpectedly, the first person to come here was such a professional corpse collection team. Xiaopinggan turned his head, looked at the iron tower in the distance, and then looked at the professional corpse collection team that was harvesting organs in the van in front of him. The last image of the so-called romantic city was completely shattered in Xiaopinggan's heart. As the white vans left, Xiaopinggan also put away his gun, left the rooftop of the apartment building, and slowly climbed down the fire escape ladder behind a wall in the alley near the back of the apartment building. But Xiaopinggan didn't go far. When he climbed to the fourth floor, he saw that the glass of a window next to the escape ladder had been smashed into several large holes, and the curtains inside the window were not closed. This apartment was obviously no one was living there anymore, so Xiaopinggan reached out to open the window and entered the apartment from the escape ladder. This apartment is not old, about 70 to 80 square meters, but it has obviously been unoccupied for a long time. The door of the apartment is locked, and the things in the apartment are a little messy. They may have been turned over by thieves. Especially the things in the kitchen of the apartment were turned over in a mess, and even a bottle of seasoning was gone. There was some dust on the ground in the apartment, and some messy footprints could be seen on the dust extending from the window. Xiaopinggan stayed in the apartment temporarily and stopped running around. He needs time to recover his strength most now. Before his strength recovers, he can keep a low profile for the time being. There is no need to be too fussy and attract too much attention. As for the BG gang, in Xiaopinggan's eyes, they are completely like ants and shit. There is no need. Now he is rushing to find trouble with the BG gang. With his current recovery speed, there is a big difference between going one day earlier and one day later. He doesn't need to worry about the affairs of the Chinese community in Paris for the time being. The Chinese community in Paris can persist in such a chaotic city for such a long time. Naturally, it has its own way of survival, and it is no less than these 2 days. His first priority now is to take care of himself, eat well, wait quietly, and regain his strength. When the spirit body and the body merge, proper exercise will also speed up the fusion, allowing the body to adapt to the changes in the spirit body more quickly. He had just killed so many people from the BG gang, and those people from the BG gang would know the news soon, and they would be looking for him everywhere like crazy. At this time, no one would have imagined that after killing so many people from the BG gang outside, he actually did not leave, but just found a place to stay nearby. After checking the room, Xiaopinggan cleared a clean area in the room, took off his coat, put the tactical vest and weapons away, and then began to exercise silently in the room, slowly fighting fist. Boxing can accelerate the body's metabolism and blood flow, and in conjunction with the body's changes, it can stretch the body's ligaments, meridians, muscles, and bones bit by bit. Just over 10 minutes later, Xiaopinggan was sweating profusely and his body was steaming. Half an hour later, Xiaopinggan's skin began to turn red, his eyes became brighter and brighter, and the speed and strength of his punches and kicks gradually increased. An hour later, Xiaopinggan began to slow down his movements little by little. Finally, he completely calmed down and began to close his eyes to rest his mind, and regulate his breathing. After more than half an hour, as soon as his energy was restored, Xiaopinggan slowly began to punch again, from shallow to deep, until his whole body was steaming like a steamer, and then he began to calm down slowly, closed his eyes, rested, and adjusted his breath. In this way, after only 4 times, 7 or 8 hours had passed, Xiaopinggan's stomach rumbled again, and he felt hungry and thirsty again. After a whole afternoon of exercise, the effect is amazing. Xiaopinggan felt that his connection with the secret mandala was getting closer. Before, he had only sensed the totems of the spell summoning positions of the 3 foundation establishment beads. But at this moment, the induction of the 3 foundation establishment beads had been completely stabilized. Moreover, he has sensed the summoning position of the slave soldier world bead, and the world bead that summons the black dragon is also vaguely there. he has a vague feeling that the divine power he can mobilize has reached about 90 points, and his physical fitness has been further strengthened. Although it was not yet so smooth, it was almost possible to summon elite slave soldiers. This made Xiaoping feel refreshed, and the feeling of just becoming a summoner seemed to be back. What Xiaoping wants most now is to have another delicious meal to further replenish the body's calories and consumption, and then take a comfortable hot bath. Maybe when he wakes up tomorrow morning, everything will be different.